Hello, everyone. This is Silly Sod. Today we're going to be reading some more Paradise Lost, one of my favorite epic poems by John Milton. Also considered one of the greatest works of literature of all time. Today is going to be book 6. So, yeah, thanks for joining in, and let's just get right to it. Book 6, Paradise Lost, called The Argument. Raphael continues to relate how Michael and Gabriel were sent forth to battle against Satan and angels. The first fight described, Satan and his powers retire under night. He calls a council. Board council links two events and associates the negative connotations of the second. Invents devilish engines, which in the second day's fight put Michael and his some disorder. But they, at length, pulling up mountains, overwhelmed both the force and machines of Satan. Yet the tumult not so ending, God on the third day sends Messiah his son, for whom he had reserved the glory of that victory. He, in the power of his Father, coming to the place, and causing all his legions to stand still on either side, with his chariot and thunder driving into the midst of his enemies, pursues them unable to resist towards the wall of heaven, which opening they leap down with horror and confusion into the place of punishment prepared for them in the deep. Messiah returns with triumph to his Father. All night the dreadless angel, Abdiel, a fearless angel, unpursued through heaven's wide champaign, held his way, till morn, waked by the circling hours, with rosy hand, Milton echoed Homer's fingered dawn, unbarred the gates of light. There is a cave within the mount of God, fast by his throne, where light and darkness and perpetual round lodge and dislodge by turns, which makes through heaven grateful vicissitude, like day and night. Light issues forth, and at the other door obsequious darkness enters, till her hour. Passage echo Hesiod's Theogony. But in Theogony the cave is in the underworld and follows the description of the battle. To veil the heaven, though darkness there might well seem twilight here, and now went forth the morn, such as in highest heaven, arrayed in God imperial, from before her the morn is here gendered feminine, though in Book 7 Raphael speaks of the sun as light, the first of created things, he speaks of as feminine. From before her vanished night, shot through with orient beams, when all the plain covered with thick embattled squadrons bright, chariots and flaming arms, and fiery steeds reflecting blaze on blaze first met his view. War he perceived, war in procinct, readiness, war is in readiness in heaven, and found already known what he for news had thought to have reported. Gladly then he mixed among those friendly powers whom him received with joy and acclamations loud, that of so many myriads fallen, yet one returned not lost. Milton's emphasis on the importance of one righteous individual surrounded by wickedness is supported by many biblical passages, from the story of Sodom and Gomorrah to Moses, and culminating in the life of Jesus. Milton also may have regarded himself as one just man surrounded by evildoers, since often he had to defend his religious convictions to those in power, and on the issue of divorce he was nearly alone among his English contemporaries. Yet one returned not lost. On to the sacred hill they led him high applauded, and present before the seat supreme, from whence a voice from midst a golden cloud, the Bible sometimes describes God as speaking from a cloud, thus mild was heard, Servant of God, well done. This is addressed to Abdiel, whose name literally means servant of God. The phrase also echoes the words of the Master to the faithful servants in Jesus' parable of the talents. Milton's fascination with this parable is evident in Sonnet 19. Well hast thou fought the better fight. This echoes 2 Timothy 4:7. Classical epics often celebrated heroes in single combat, who, like Hector, fight as proxy for a whole army. Milton's poem celebrates in Abdiel quite a different sort of single combat. The better fight. who single hast maintained against revolted multitudes the cause of truth, in word mightier than they in arms, and for the testimony of truth hast borne universal reproach, far worse to bear than violence. For this was all thy care, to stand approved in sight of God. Though worlds judged thee perverse, the easier conquest now remains thee. Aided by this host of friends, back on thy foes, more glorious to return than scorn thou didst depart, and to subdue by force, who reason for their law refuse, might reason for their law, and for their king Messiah, who by right of merit reigns. Go Michael, Michael is Hebrew for godlike, or strength of God, of celestial armies prince, and thou in military prowess next Gabriel, another archangel. Gabriel, like Raphael, was a heavenly messenger. Lead forth to battle these my sons. All angels, as all men, are God's sons. No angels in Milton's writings are female. This poem frequently refers to Eve as daughter of God and man. See Satan's musing over the expression son of God and paradise regained. Invincible, lead forth my armed saints. Milton's angels resemble in some ways the biblical descriptions of the church militant in Ephesians 6:10-18. Homer's and Virgil's epic heroes were also armed or protected by gods. By alluding to the biblical armor of God, however, Milton suggests that the angels' armor was spiritual. By thousands and by millions ranged for fight, equal in number, Satan drew off a third of heaven's host in his rebellion. The Father presumably sends exactly the same number of loyal angels into battle against them. Equal in number to that godless crew, rebellious, them with fire in hostile arms, fearless assault, and to the brow of heaven, pursuing drive them out from God and bliss, into their place of punishment, the Gulf of Tartarus, classical name for hell, see Apollodorus. On chaos in relation to hell, see Schwartz, remembering and repeating. Of Tartarus, which ready opens wide his fiery chaos to receive their fall. So spake the sovereign voice, and clouds began to darken all the hill, and smoke to rowl in dusky wreaths, reluctant flames, the sign. Milton models the presence of God on Exodus 19:18, where God appears to Moses on Mount Sinai, of wrath awaked. Nor with less dread the loud ethereal trumpet from on high gan blow, at which command the powers militant that stood for heaven, in mighty quadrate, a military term denoting a square or cubic troop formation, joined of union irresistible, moved on in silence their bright legions to the sound of instrumental harmony that breathed heroic ardor to adventurous deeds. Book 9:13-32, Milton's narrator will condemn military subjects as less heroic than patience and heroic martyrdom. And in Book 2, he parodies military heroism in the fallen angels. Abdiel, who, too, is celebrated for a higher-than-martial sort of heroism. Nonetheless, Milton's angels are still depicted as warriors. Heroic ardor to adventurous deeds under their godlike leaders in the cause of God and his Messiah. On they move indissolubly firm, nor obvious hill, nor straightening vale, nor wood, nor stream divides their perfect ranks, for high above the ground their march was, and the passive air upbore their nimble tread, as when the total kind of birds in orderly array on wing came summoned over Eden to receive their names of thee. Genesis 2:19 tells the story of God bringing all beasts and birds before Adam for naming. Adam retells the story in 8:3. So over many a tract of heaven they marched, and many a province wide, tenfold the length of this terrain. At last far in the horizon to the north appeared, from skirt to skirt, a fiery region stretched, and battalious aspect in nearer view, bristled with upright beams innumerable, of rigid spears and helmets thronged, and shields various, with boastful argument portrayed, the banded powers of Satan hasting on with furious expedition. For they weened that self-same day by fight, or by surprise to win the mount of God, and on his throne to set the envier of his state, the proud aspirer, but their thoughts proved fond and vain. In the midway, even before they were halfway to the throne, it was clear they would be defeated. Yeah. Though strange to us it seemed at first that angels should with angel war, and in fierce hosting meet, who wont to meet so oft in festivals of joy and love unanimous, as sons of one great sire, hymning the eternal Father. But the shout of battle now began, and rushing sound of onset ended soon each milder thought. High in the midst exalted as a god, the apostate, one who forsakes his religious faith. Note also the numerous uses of variants and synonyms of the word used in Book 6. In his sun-bright chariot, Satan's chariot is bright, but it does not burn with the thick flames of the sun's divine chariot. Although Satan's chariot is impressive, it will pale in comparison to the sun's. The apostate in sun-bright chariot, Satan, idol of majesty divine, in portraying himself as a god, Satan has violated what will be handed down in Exodus 23:5 as the first commandment. Enclosed with flaming cherubim and golden shields, then lighted from his gorgeous throne. For now twixt host and host but narrow space was left, a dreadful interval, and front to front presented stood in terrible array, of hideous length before the cloudy van. On the rough edge of battle ere it joined, Satan with vast and haughty strides advanced, came towering, armed in adamant and gold, Abdiel, that sight endured not, where he stood, among the mightiest, bent on highest deeds, and thus his own undaunted heart explores. The phrase recalls Homer's introduction of Hector's speech before his battle with Achilles in Iliad 22. O heaven, that such resemblance of the highest! Abdiel acknowledges that Satan retains some celestial beauty despite his rebel nature. Since Raphael tells this story to Adam in the form of a warning, he may be cautioning Adam not to admire beauty overmuch, as he later advises Adam to be wary of attributing overmuch to Eve's beauty. Satan's sin affects his appearance, especially after he has fallen to hell. He becomes unrecognizable to other angels. That such resemblance of the highest should yet remain, where faith and reality, sincerity, honesty, remain not. Wherefore should not strength and might there fail where virtue fails, or weakest prove where boldest, though to sight unconquerable? His puissance, trusting the Almighty's aid, I mean to try, whose reason I have tried, unsound and false. Nor is it aught but just, that he who in debate of truth hath won, should win in arms, and both disputes alike victor, though brutish that contest and foul, when reason hath to deal with force, yet so most reason is that reason overcome. It is most reasonable, the notion that a contestant, who prevails in truth should also prevail in combat, underlies the practice of trial by combat. So pondering, and from his armed peers forth stepping opposite, halfway he met his daring foe, at this prevention more incensed, and thus securely him defied. Proud art thou met. Abdiel uses this epithet to address Satan, whose name we were told had already been erased from the book of life. Thy hope was to have reached the height of thy aspiring unopposed, the throne of God unguarded, and his side abandoned at the terror of thy power or potent tongue. Fool, not to think how vain against the omnipotent to rise in arms, who out of smallest things could without end have raised incessant armies to defeat thy folly, or with solitary hand, reaching beyond all limit at one blow, unaided could have finished thee, and whelmed thy legions under darkness. But thou seest all are not of thy train. There be who faith prefer, and piety to God, though then to thee not visible, when I alone seemed in thy world erroneous to dissent from all. My sect thou seest, often used in the 17th century as a term to designate religious schismatics like Baptists, Familists, or Quakers. Milton speaks almost approvingly of sectarian and schismatic differences of opinion in see also the preface to Iconoclastes. Now learn too late how few sometimes may know when thousands err. How few sometimes may know when thousands. Whom the grand foe with scornful eye askance, sideways with a side glance, thus answered, Ill for thee, but in wished hour of my revenge first sought, for thou return'st from flight, seditious angel. Satan's point of view, loyalty to God appears as sedition. To receive thy merited reward. the first essay of this right hand provoked, since first that tongue inspired with contradiction durst oppose a third part of the gods in synod, gathering especially of church dignitaries, met their deities to assert, who while they feel vigor divine within them, can allow omnipotence to none. But well thou comest before thy fellows, ambitious to win from me some plume, an ornament symbolizing dignity or rank, often attached to a military helmet. Satan accuses Abdiel of turning to God only to curry favor and advancement in heaven, of course. That thy success may show destruction to the rest. This pause between, that is, between your challenge and your destruction. Unanswered, least thou boast. That is, lest you boast that I left your challenge unanswered. To let thee know, at first I thought that liberty in heaven to heavenly souls had been all one, but now I see that most through sloth had rather serve. Milton often expressed the notion that certain people, sometimes whole races, are content to become slaves to tyrants. I see that most through sloth had rather serve, ministering spirits, trained up in feast and song. Such hast thou armed the minstrelsy of heaven, servility with freedom to contend, as both their deeds compared this day shall prove. To whom in brief thus Abdiel stern replied, Apostate! Still thou errest, nor end wilt find of erring from the path of truth remote. Unjustly thou depravest it with the name of servitude to serve whom God ordains, or nature. God and nature bid the same, the central tenet of natural law philosophy. When he who rules is worthiest, and excels them whom he governs, this is servitude, to serve the unwise, or him who hath rebelled against his worthier, as thine now serve thee, thyself not free, but to thyself enthralled. For a similar definition of loss of liberty, the son's theory of a just king worthy of obedience. See Paradise Regained. Yet lewdly darest our ministering upbraid. Reign thou in heaven thy kingdom. Let me serve in heaven God ever blessed, and his divine behest obey, worthiest to be obeyed. Yet chains in hell, not realms expect, meanwhile from me returned, as erst thou saidst from flight. This greeting on thy impious crest receive. That is, on Satan's helmeted head. So saying, a noble stroke he lifted high, which hung not but so swift with tempest fell on the proud crest of Satan, that no sight nor motion of swift thought less could his shield such ruin intercept. 10 paces huge he back recoiled, the 10th on bended knee his massy spear upstead, as if on earth winds underground or waters forcing way sidelong had pushed a mountain from his seat, half sunk with all his pines. Amazement seized the rebel thrones, but greater rage to see thus foiled their mightiest, ours joy filled and shout, presage of victory and fierce desire of battle, whereat Michael bid sound the archangel trumpet. Through the vast heaven it sounded, and the faithful armies rung Hosanna to the highest. Nor stood at gaze the adverse legions, nor less hideous joined the horrid shock. Now storming fury rose in clamor such as heard in heaven still till now was never. Arms on armor, clashing braid, horrible discord, and the madding wheels of brazen chariots raged. Dire was the noise of conflict. Overhead the dismal hiss of fiery darts in flaming volleys flew. Ephesians 6:16. And flying vaulted, either host with fire, so under fiery cope together rushed. Sky. Both battles main, the main body of both auto. With ruinous assault and inextinguishable rage, all heaven resounded, and had earth been then, all earth had to her center shook. What wonder, when millions of fierce encountering angels fought on either side, the least of whom could wield these elements and arm him with the force of all their regions. How much more of power army against army, numberless to raise dreadful combustion warring, and disturb, though not destroy, their happy native seat. Had not the eternal King omnipotent from his stronghold of heaven high overruled and limited their might, though numbered such as each divided legion might have seemed a numerous host, in strength each armed hand a legion, led in fight, yet leader seemed each warrior single as in chief, expert, when to advance or stand, or turn the sway of battle open when, and when to close the ridges of grim war. No thought of flight, none of retreat, no deed unbecoming to a warrior. Even the rebel angels, though their rebellion is condemned, behaved, says Raphael, like exemplary soldiers. That argued feared, each on himself relied, as only in his arm the moment lay of victory. Deeds of eternal flame were done, but infinite, for wide was spread that war in various, sometimes on firm ground, a standing fight, then soaring on main wing tormented all the air. All air seemed then conflicting fire. Long time in even scale the battle hung, till Satan, who that day prodigious power had shewn, and met in arms no equal, ranging through the dire attack of fighting seraphim confused, at length saw where the sword of Michael smote, and felled squadrons at once, with huge two-handed sway brandished aloft the horrid edge, came down wide wasting. Such destruction to withstand he hasted, and opposed the rocky orb of tenfold adamant. His ample shield, the shield is apparently made of rock or diamond. Satan's shield is described in epic style. And also note, shields were vigorously described and important in Homer's Iliad. His ample shield of vast circumference, at his approach, the great archangel from his warlike toil surceased, and glad as hoping here to end intestine war, civil war, in heaven, the arch foe subdued or captive dragged and changed, with hostile frown and visage all inflamed, first thus began: Author of evil, unknown till thy revolt, unnamed in heaven, now plenteous as thou seest these acts of hateful strife, hateful to all, thou heaviest by just measure on thyself and thy adherents. How hast thou disturbed heaven's blessed peace, and into nature brought misery, uncreated till the crime of thy rebellion? How hast thou instilled thy malice into thousands? Once upright, Adam too will be reduced from his upright position due to his lack of obedience. In his case, though, it will be a specific effeminate slackness that leads him to disobey. And faithful, now proved false. But think not here to trouble holy rest. Heaven cast thee out from all her confines. Heaven, the seat of bliss, brooks not the works of violence and war. Hence then an evil go with thee along, thy offspring, to the place of evil hell. Offspring, Michael means Satan's followers, as well as the two other members of the unholy trinity, sin and death. To the place of evil, hell, thou and thy wicked crew, there mingle broils, ere this avenging sword begin thy doom, or some more sudden vengeance, winged from God, precipitate thee with augmented pain. So spake the Prince of Angels, to whom thus the adversary: Nor think thou with wind of airy threats to all, whom yet with deeds thou canst not. Hast thou turned the least of these to flight, or if to fall, but that they rise unvanquished, easier to transact with me, that thou shouldst hope, imperious, and with threats to chase me hence? Ere not that so shall end the strife which thou callest evil, but we style the strife of glory, which we mean to win, or turn this heaven itself into the hell. The geography of Milton's cosmos is both physical and spiritual. After the event of the battle, Satan will discover that he truly is his own hell, even while in heaven or on earth. Or turn this heaven itself into the hell thou fablest, here however to dwell free, if not to reign. Meanwhile thy utmost force, and join him named Almighty to thy aid. I flee not, but have sought thee far and nigh. They ended parley talk, especially the negotiations and posturing between opponents in battle, and both addressed for fight unspeakable. For who, though with the tongue of angels can relate, or to what things liken on earth conspicuous, that may lift human imagination to such height of godlike power? For like as gods they seemed, stood they or moved in stature, motion, arms, fit to decide the empire of great heaven. Now waved their fiery swords, and in the air made horrid circles, Two broad suns their shields blazed opposite, while expectation stood in horror. From each hand with speed retired, where erst was thickest fight, the angelic throng, and left large field, unsafe within the wind of such commotion, such as to set forth great things by small. If nature's concord broke, among the constellations war were sprung. Two planets rushing from aspect malign of fiercest opposition in mid-sky should combat, and their jarring spheres confound. Raphael suggests that one way Adam may visualize war in heaven is by thinking of the constellations at war with each other, or two planets in single combat. Such a conflict would be a microcosm of the battle Raphael describes. Together, both with next to almighty arm uplifted imminent, one stroke they aimed, that might determine and not need repeat, as not of power, a difficult sentence. Both combatants, each one degree removed from Almighty, aimed one stroke each as if they meant only to strike once and determine the matter by that single stroke. To expect to repeat such a stroke would be nonsense, for that would indicate the first stroke was not of power to do the job. Some types of martial training aim to teach soldiers to prevail with a single stroke. As not of power at once, nor odds appeared, that is, there appeared no evidence that either the mighty stroke, Michael's attack, or its swift prevention, Satan's parry, would prevail. Nor odds appeared in might or swift prevention, but the sword of Michael from the armory of God was given him tempered so, that neither keen nor solid might resist that edge. It met the sword of Satan with steep force to smite descending, and in half cut sheer nor stead, but with swift wheel reversed, deep entering sheared or completely severed. Michael's first stroke cut Satan's sword in half, and his swift wheel reverse, as one complete stroke cut Satan's right side completely away. All his right side, then Satan first knew pain, and writhed him to and fro convolved, so sore the grinding sword with discontinuous wound, that is, an open wound. The cut is continuous, but the resulting wound, being wide open, is technically called discontinuous. Passed through him, but the ethereal substance closed not long divisible, and from the gash a stream of nectarous humor. This passage echoes one in the Iliad, which also describes a celestial battle. Aphrodite's hand is pierced, and she bleeds the nectarous blood of the gods, Ichor, but is healed by Dione, her mother, Dione. A stream of nectarous humor issuing flowed, sanguine, such as celestial spirits may bleed, and all his armor stained air while so bright. Forthwith on all sides to his aid was run, by angels many and strong who interposed defense, while others bore him on their shields back to his chariot, where it stood retired from all the files of war. There they him laid, gnashing for anguish, and despite and shame to find himself not matchless, and his pride humbled by such rebuke, so far beneath his confidence to equal God in power. Yet soon he healed, for spirits that live throughout vital in every part, not as frail man in entrails, heart or head, liver or rinds, the kidney bones, cannot but by annihilating die. In Book 2, Belial defined annihilation as being swallowed up and lost in the wide tomb of uncreated night. Nor in their liquid texture mortal wound receive no more than can the fluid air. All heart they live, all head, all eye, all ear, all intellect, all sense, and as they please they limn themselves, and color, shape, or size assume, as likes them best, condense or rare. Meanwhile, in other parts like deeds deserved, memorial, where the might of Gabriel fought, and with fierce ensigns, a rallying or battle cry, pierced the deep array of Moloch, furious king. Moloch was introduced in Book 1, but as John Leonard perceptively notes, Milton may have slipped here by having Raphael name some of the fallen angels. By those names fallen humans will give them by adoring devils for deities. By using these names, Raphael pretty much presupposes the fall he has been sent to avert. Of Moloch, furious king, who him defied, and at his chariot wheels to drag him bound threatened, nor from the Holy One of heaven refrained his tongue blasphemous, but anon, down cloven to the to the waist, with shattered arms, an uncouth unknown. In this battle, the rebel angels first feel pain. Apparently, the loyal angels following Michael and Gabriel can be pushed and moved, but not hurt or frightened. An uncouth pain fled bellowing. On each wing, Uriel and Raphael. Raphael speaks of himself in the third person. He has not introduced himself to Adam by name, nor does he ever. Thus he is in some ways like Odysseus relating the stories of the Trojan War to Alcinous and his people. Unlike Odysseus, however, he does not reveal his identity nor focus his story on himself, but on the sun's authority and the moral victory of Abdiel. Uriel and Raphael, his vaunting foe, though huge and in a rock of diamond armed, vanquished Adramelech. Adramelech, the mighty king, was a local version of the Babylonian sun god. 2 Kings 17, verse 31 says that children were burned on his altar. Throughout, Milton uses the names of foreign gods from past ages to signify the false godhood of the rebellious angels. And Asmodai, the evil Asmodeus of the Tobit story, also mentioned in Book 4. Two potent thrones, that to be less than gods disdain, but meaner thoughts learned in their flight, lower ambitions, mangled with ghastly wounds through plate and mail, nor stood unmindful Abdiel to annoy the atheist crew, but with redoubled blow Ariel. In Kabbalistic lore, Ariel is the name of an evil angel and pagan god. In Cornelius Agrippa's De Occulto Philosophia, it is the name of one of the spirits of the earth. Ariel is the name of Prospero's familiar spirit in Shakespeare's The Tempest. And Arioch, the name means lion-like. Abraham is said to have fought a king Arioch, Genesis 14:1, amongst the list of other adversary kings, some of whom are also named after their pagan gods. Another Arioch appears as a Babylonian captain in Daniel 2, verse 14. Perhaps Milton also found the name in books of demonology. And the violence of Ramael, the name means thunder of God and appears as Ramiel, one of the angels who descended to earth to copulate with the beautiful daughters of men in the apocryphal Book of Enoch. Of Ramiel, scorched and blasted overthrew, I might relate of thousands, and their names eternize here on earth. But those elect angels contented with their fame in heaven seek not the praise of men. Raphael stops his epic catalog of warriors. The heavenly ones do not, as it turns out, seek fame, and the evil ones should not have it. The others sort in might through wondrous and in acts of war, nor of renown less eager, yet by doom, cancelled from heaven in sacred memory. Nameless in dark oblivion let them dwell, for strength from truth divided, and from just illaudable. Naughts merits but dispraise and ignominy, yet to glory aspires, vainglorious, and through infamy seeks fame. Therefore eternal silence be their doom. And now their mightiest quelled, the battle swerved, with many an inroad gored, deformed rout entered, and foul disorder, all the ground with shivered armor strewn, and on a heap chariot and charioteer lay overturned, and fiery foaming steeds. What stood recoiled or wearied, through the faint satanic host defensive scarce able to defend themselves, or with pale fear surprised. Then first with fear surprised and sense of pain fled ignominious to such evil brought by sin of disobedience, till that hour not liable to fear or flight or pain. Far otherwise the inviolable saints in cubic phalanx. This battle formation was originally developed by the Greeks. It is yet another allusion to ancient war and epic. For an explanation of phalanx, see Wikipedia. In cubic phalanx, firm, advanced, entire, invulnerable, impenetrably armed, such high advantages their innocence gave them above their foes. Not to have sinned, not to have disobeyed, in fight they stood unwearied, unobnoxious, to be pained by wound, though from their place by violence moved. Now night her course began, and over heaven inducing darkness grateful truce imposed, and silence on the odious din of war. Under her cloudy covert both retired, victor and vanquished. On the foughten field Michael and his angels prevalent, encamping, placed in guard their watches round. Cherubic waving fires on the other part, which Satan with his rebellious disappeared, far in the dark dislodged and void of rest, his potentates to council called by night, and in the midst thus undismayed began. O now in danger tried, now known in arms not to be overpowered, companions dear, found worthy not of liberty alone. Satan may serve here to satirize Oliver Cromwell as one for whom liberty alone was too mean a cause for struggle, but also sought worldly honor, dominion, glory, and renown. The Commonwealth proclaimed following the execution of Charles I in 1649 effectively became a protectorate in 1654 when Cromwell assumed the title Lord Protector. Too mean pretense, but what we more affect, honor, dominion, glory, and renown, who have sustained one day in doubtful fight, and if one day, why not eternal days? What heaven's Lord had powerfulness to send against us from about his throne, and judge sufficient to subdue us to his will? But proves not so, then fallible it seems, a future we may deem him, though till now omniscient thought. True is, less firmly armed, some disadvantage we endured in pain, till now not known, but known as soon contemned. Since now we find this our imperial form incapable of mortal injury, imperishable, and though pierced with wound, soon closing, and by native vigor healed. Of evil then so small as easy think the remedy. Perhaps more valid arms, weapons more violent, when next we meet, may serve to better us, and worse our foes, or equal what between us made the odds, and nature none. If other hidden cause left them superior, while we can preserve unhurt our minds, and understanding sound, due search and consultation will disclose. He sat in the assembly. Next up stood Nisroch, an Assyrian deity mentioned in 2 Kings 1937. Of principalities the prime, as one he stood escaped from cruel fight, sore toiled his riven armies to havoc hewn, and cloudy in aspect, thus answering spake, Deliverer from new lords, leader to free enjoyment of our rights as gods, yet hard for gods, and to unequal work we find, against unequal arms to fight in pain, against unpained and passive, from which evil ruin must needs ensue. For what avails valor or strength, though matchless quelled with pain, which all subdues, and makes remiss the hands of mightiest? Sense of pleasure we may well spare out of life perhaps, and not repine, but live content, which is the calmest life. But pain is perfect misery, the worst of evils, and excessive overturns all patience. He who therefore can invent with what more forcible we may offend our yet unwounded enemies, or arm ourselves with like defense, to me deserves no less than for deliverance what we owe. Whereto, with look composed, Satan replied, Not an uninvited that, which thou aright believest so main to our success, I bring. Which of us who beholds the bright surface of this ethereous mold whereon we stand, this continent of spacious heaven, adorned with plant fruit, flower ambrosial, gems and gold, whose eye so superficially surveys these things, as not to mind from whence they grow, deep underground, materials dark and crude, of spirituous and fiery spume. This phrase represents sulfur and nitre, which in Milton's time were thought to play a role in the creation of other matter. This would make them volatile in their creativity, a kind of gunpowder, not unlike the way God's thunder appears linked to his creativity through his control over matter. Till touched with heaven's ray, and tempered they shoot forth, so beauteous opening to the ambient light. These in their dark nativity the deep shall yield us pregnant with infernal flame, which into hollow engines, long and round, thick rammed, and the other bore with touch of fire, dilated in fury it shall send forth, from far with thundering noise among our foes, such implements of mischief as shall dash to pieces, and o'erwhelm whatever stands adverse, and they shall fear we have disarmed the Thunderer. Satan uses Zeus's epithet from Hesiod's Theogony to speak of God, the Thunderer of his only dreaded bolt. Nor long shall be our labor, yet ere dawn, effect shall end our wish. Meanwhile revive, abandon fear, to strength and counsel join, think nothing hard, much less to be despaired. He ended, and his words their drooping share enlightened, and their languished hope revived. The invention all admired, and each how he to be the inventor missed, so easy it seemed once found, which yet unfound most would have thought impossible. Yet haply of thy race in future days, if malice should abound, some one intent on mischief or inspired with devilish machination might devise like instrument to plague the sons of men for sin, on war and mutual slaughter bent. Forthwith from council to the work they flew, none arguing stood, innumerable hands were ready in a moment, up they turned wide the celestial soil. Wide the celestial soil, and saw beneath the originals of nature, the basic elements in their crude conception. Sulphurous and nitrous foam they found they mingled in with subtle art, concocted and adjusted, alchemical process of heating and dried, they reduced to blackest grain, and into store conveyed, part hidden veins digged up, nor hath this earth entrails unlike of mineral and stone. The rebel angels dig up crude materials and form cannons from them. By suggesting that Earth's entrails are much like heaven's, Raphael supports the monistic theory that all substances were created out of one first matter, hydrogen, of God and by God. Therefore, they can only be made evil through evil use. By introducing the elements to the battle as weapons, putting them in their chaotic roles rather than the subservient roles of order created by God, Satan further imposes chaos on heaven, whereof to found their engines and their balls of missive ruin, part incentive reed, fuse material. Provide pernicious with one touch to fire, so all day ere day spring, under conscious night, wakeful night, the rebel angels stay awake all night making cannons. So all ere day spring, under conscious night's secret they finished, and in order set with science circumspection unespied and espied. Now when fair morn orient in heaven appeared, uprose the victor angels, and to arms the matin trumpet sung. In arms they stood of golden panoply, refulgent host, radiant and gleaming. Soon banded, others from the dawning hills looked round and scouch each coast, light arms scour each quarter to descry the distant foe, where lodged or whither fled, or if for fight, in motion or in alt. Him soon they met under spread ensigns, here ensigns of battle banners, moving nigh in slow but firm battalion, back with speediest sails afield. Means spy of God, it is not a biblical name. Of cherubim the swiftest wing came flying, and in mid-air aloud thus cried, Arm, warriors, arm for fight, the foe at hand, whom fled we thought will save us long pursuit this day. Fear not his flight, so thick a cloud he comes, and settled in his face I see sad resolution and secure. Let each his adamantine, having the hardness or luster of a diamond, coat gird well, and each fit well his helm, grip fast his orbed shield, borne even or high, for this day will pour down, if I conjecture aught, no drizzling shower, but rattling storm of arrows barbed with fire. So warned he them aware themselves, and soon in order quit all of all impediment. Instant without disturb they took alarm, and onward move embattled, when behold, not distant far, with heavy pace the foe approaching gross and huge, in hollow cube, that is, in a quadrate formation with an empty center where the cannon is concealed, training his devilish enginery, impaled on every side with shadowing squadrons deep to hide the fraud. An interview both stood a while, but suddenly at head appeared Satan, and thus was heard commanding loud. Vanguard, to right and left the front unfold, that all may see who hate us, how we seek peace and composure, and with open breasts stand ready to receive them. And if they like our overture, and turn not back perverse, but that I doubt, however witness heaven, heaven witness thou anon, while we discharge, as with the word charge in 566, Satan is a rather dry punster. freely our part. Ye who appointed stand, do as you have in charge, and briefly touch what we propound, and loud that all may hear. So scoffing an ambiguous so scoffing an ambiguous words, he scarce as a comma after had ended, when to right and left the front divided, and to either flank retired, which to our eyes discovered new and strange a triple mounted row of pillars laid on wheels, for like to pillars most they seemed, or hollow bodies made of oak or fir, with branches lopped, and wood or mountain felled, brass, iron, stony mould, and not their mouths with hideous orifice gaped on us wide, portending hollow truce. At each behind a seraph stood, and in his hand a reed stood waving tipped with fire, while we suspense collected stood within our thoughts amused. Not long for sudden all at once their reeds put forth into a narrow vent applied with nicest touch, immediate and aflame, but soon obscured with smoke. All heaven appeared, from those deep-throated engines belched, whose roar emboweled with outrageous noise the air, and all her entrails tore, disgorging foul their devilish glut. Chained thunderbolts, chain shot, 2 cannonballs with a length of chain between used to take out a whole vanguard at one blast. Chained thunderbolts and hail of iron globes, which on the victor host levelled, with such impetuous fury smote, that whom they hit, none on their feet might stand, though standing else as rocks. But down they fell by thousands, angel on archangel rowled, the sooner for their arms, an example of Milton's disdain for arms and weapons in general. Other examples of this disdain can be found in Damson Agonis. God's forces prevail again when they abandon their arms at below in 9. Unarmed they might have easily as spirits evaded swift by quick contraction or remove, but now foul dissipation followed in forced rout, nor served it to relax their serried files, but files or ranks of armed men pressed close to each other. What should they do, if on they rushed, repulse repeated, and decent overthrow doubled, would render them yet more despised, and to their foes a laughter, for in view stood ranked of seraphim another row, in posture to displode their second tire of thunder, fire another round. Back defeated to return they worst abhorred. Satan beheld their plight, and to his mates thus in derision called, O friends, why come not on these victors a proud? Ere while they fierce were coming, and when we to entertain them fair with open front and breast, what could we more propounded terms of composition? Straight they changed their minds, flew off, and into strange vagaries fell, as they would dance. Actually,
vagary.
And into strange vagaries fell, as they would dance. Yet for a dance they seemed somewhat extravagant and wild, perhaps for joy of offered peace. But I suppose if our proposals once again were heard, we should compel them to a quick result. To whom thus Belial, Latin Vulgate name devil, or to whom thus Belial, in like gamesome mood, leader, the terms we sent were terms of weight, of hard contents, and full of force urged home, such as we might perceive amuse them all, and stumbled many who received them right, had need from head to foot well understand. Not understood, this gift they have besides, they shew us when our foes walk not upright. So they among themselves in pleasant vein stood scoffing. Insults were commonplace in epic battles of the Iliad and the Aeneid, yeah. But it is notable that the sinless angels do not participate in them, and are not concerned with their own honor. Thus they have no need to return scorn for scorn. Heightened in their thoughts beyond all doubt of victory, eternal might to match with their inventions they presumed so easy, and of his thunder made a scorn, and all his host derided, while they stood a while in trouble. But they stood not long, rage prompted them at length, and found them arms against such hellish mischief fit to oppose. Forthwith behold the excellence, the power with God, which God hath in his mighty angels place. Their arms away they threw, and to the hells, for earth hath this variety from heaven, of pleasure situate in hill and dale. Light as the lightning glimpse they ran. They flew from their foundations, loosening to and fro. They plucked the seated hills. Hesiod's Theogony 7:13 through 7:20. The heroes fighting for Zeus throw hundreds of boulders at the Titans. In Pseudo Apollodorus' library, we read the story of Typhon attacking Zeus by throwing whole mountains, which nevertheless fall back on him. Zeus finishes Typhon by throwing Mount Etna on him. Here, the loyal angels in effect rebury the cannon and gunpowder the rebel angels dug from the soil of heaven. They plucked the seated hills with all their load, rocks, waters, woods, and by the shaggy tops uplifting bore them in their hands. Amaze, be sure, and terror seized the rebel host. When coming towards them so dread they saw the bottom of the mountains upward turned, till on those cursed engines triple rode they saw them whelmed, and all their confidence under the weight of mountains buried deep, themselves invaded next, and on their heads main promontories flung, which in the air came shadowing, and oppressed whole legions armed. Their armor helped their harm. Now armor hinders the rebels as before it had hindered the loyal angels. Crushed in and bruised, this is not the last time that Satan and his forces will be bruised, into their substance pent, which wrought them pain implacable, and many a dolorous groan. Long struggling underneath, ere they could wend out of such prison, though spirits of purest light, purest at first, now gross by sinning grown, the rest in imitation to like arms took them, and the neighboring hills uptore. So hills amid the air encountered hills, hurled to and fro with jaculation dire, the action of darting, hurling, or throwing, a hurl, a throw, from Latin iaccio, iacere. That underground they fought in dismal shade, infernal noise. War seemed a civil game to this uproar. Horrid confusion heaped upon confusion rose, and now all heaven had gone to rack with ruin overspread. Had not the Almighty Father, where he sits shrined in his sanctuary of heaven secure, consulting on the sum of things, foreseen this tumult, and permitted all advised, that his great purpose he might so fulfill, to honor his anointed Son avenged upon his enemies, and to declare all power on him transferred, whence to his Son, the assessor, one who sits beside, hence one who shares another's rank, position, or dignity. Of his throne he thus began: Effulgence of my glory, Son beloved, Son in whose face invisible is beheld visibly. The Son is the visible manifestation of the Father's invisible power. And remember, the Son is the executor of the Father's power, and being and enacts his will. Thus, invisible in line 681 must be read as a substantive meaning. What is invisible? See also 3, where the Son is said to be the visible expression of the Father. Visibly, what by deity I am, in whose hand what by decree I do. Second, omnipotence. 2 days are past, 2 days as we compute the days of heaven, since Michael and his powers went forth to tame these disobedience. Sore hath been their fight, as likeliest was, when two such foes met armed. For to themselves I left them, and thou knowest, equal in their creation they were formed. Save what sin hath impaired, which yet hath wrought insensibly, perceptibly, for I suspend their doom. Whence in perpetual fight, Satan called eternal war, seen from God's perspective, they needs must last endless. And no solution will be found. War wearied hath performed what war can do, and to disordered rage let loose the reins, with mountains as with weapons armed, which makes wild work in heaven, and dangerous to the main. 2 days are therefore past, the third is thine. Third day. Milton's emphasis on the Son's single combat against all of the Satan's forces on the third day of battle also alludes to Jesus' passion, death, and resurrection on the third day. For thee I have ordained it, and thus far have suffered, that the glory may be thine of ending this great war, since none but thou can end it. Into thee such virtue and grace immense I have transfused, that all may know in heaven and hell thy power above compare, and this perverse commotion govern thus, to manifest thee worthiest to be heir of all things, to be heir and to be king by sacred unction. Anointing Messiah means anointed one. Thy deserved right. Go then, thou mightiest, in thy Father's might. Ascend my chariot. The image alludes to the legend of Phaeton, who stole his father Phoebus, Apollo's chariot, the sun, and wrecked it, destroying both himself and much of the earth. Unlike Phaeton, Milton's son is invited to ride the father's chariot. Guide the rapid wheels that shake heaven's basis, bring forth all my war, my bow and thunder, my almighty arms, gird on, and sword upon thy puissant thigh, pursue these sons of darkness, drive them out from all heaven's bounds into the utter deep. From there let them learn, as likes them to despise God and Messiah, his anointed king. He said, and on his son with rays direct shone full. He all his father full expressed, ineffably into his face received. And thus the filial Godhead answered, spake, O Father, O supreme of heavenly thrones, first, highest, holiest, best, thou always seekst to glorify thy Son. See John 17, 1-10. I always thee, as is most just, this I my glory account, my exaltation, and my whole delight. That thou in me well pleased declarest thy will fulfilled, which to fulfill is all my bliss, scepter and power thy giving I assume, and gladlier shall resign, when in the end thou shalt be all in all, and I in thee forever, and in me all whom thou lovest, and whom thou hatest, I hate. Psalm 139, 20-21, and can put on thy terrors, as I put thy mildness on, image of thee in all things, and shall soon, armed with thy might, rid heaven of these rebelled to their prepared ill mansion. Here used as a contrast to heaven. Christ says, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. John 14:2. Ill mansion, then is a twisted version of heaven. Driven down to chains of darkness. 2 Peter 2:4-9. And the undying worm, that from thy just obedience could revolt, whom to obey is happiness entire. Then shall thy saints unmixed, and from the impure far separate, circling thy holy mount unfeigned, hallelujahs to thee sing, hymns of high praise, and I among them chief. So said he o'er his sceptre bowing, rose from the right hand of glory where he sate. And the third sacred morn began to shine, dawning through heaven. Forth rushed with whirlwind sound the chariot of paternal deity. The Son's chariot of paternal deity contrasts with Satan's earlier chariot of lines 99-100, when he uses the image of power and will to try to elevate himself to God's position. Flashing thick flames, wheel within wheel, the imagery of the divine chariot comes. Undrawn, itself instinct with spirit, but convoyed by four cherubic shapes. 4 faces, each had a wondrous, as with stars their bodies all, and wings were set with eyes the wheels of beryl. A transparent precious stone mentioned in Ezekiel 10:9, part of the description of God's heavenly chariot, and careering fires between. Over their heads a crystal firmament, whereon a safer throne inlaid with pure amber, and colors of the showery arc rainbow. He in celestial panoply, all armed. The sun's armor, like the armor of Aeneas and Achilles, is divinely wrought. However, this armor is made of light, which indicates its spiritual nature. Side note, it's a big deal in Homer's Iliad, who got when you defeated an enemy, you would take their armor as a totem of your accomplishments in battle. Of radiant Urim, one of the types of mystical stones, along with the Thummim, said to decorate the breastplate of Aaron, the high priest and brother of Moses. The Exodus 28:30 and Book 3. Work divinely wrought ascended at his right hand victory. Milton has chosen a Roman goddess Victory to represent the triumph of the sun. State eagle winged Beside him hung his bow and quiver with 3 bolted thunder stored, and from about him fierce effusion riled, of smoke and bickering flame and sparkles dire. Milton uses Ezekiel's vision of God's presence, Ezekiel 1 4 through 14, to indicate the majesty of God the Father made manifest in the Son. Attended with 10,000 saints, he onward came, far off his coming shone, and 20,000 either number heard, chariots of God, half on each hand were seen, he on the wings of cherub, as in the act of creation recounted in Book 7. Milton seems intent on leaving the impression that the Son's activity here is similar both in the source of its power and in its purpose to the act of creation. Here he separates the rebel angels far from the faithful. In creation, he separates light from dark and the earth from dry land. He on the wings of cherub rode sublime on the crystalline sky, and safer throned, illustrious far and wide, but by his own first seen, them unexpected joy surprised, when the great ensign of Messiah blazed aloft by angels borne, his sign in heaven, under whose conduct Michael soon reduced, that is, he led his army back under the command of the Son, his army, circumfused, spread out on either wing, under their head embodied all in one. Before him, power divine his way prepared. At his command the uprooted hills retired, each to his place. They heard his voice and went obsequious. Heaven his wonted face renewed, and with fresh flowers hill and valley smiled. This saw his hapless foes, but stood obdurate, hardened, and to rebellious fight rallied their powers. Insensate, hope conceiving from despair. In heavenly spirits could such perverseness dwell, but to convince the proud what signs avail, or wonders move the obdurate to relent. Milton recalls Christ's alleged frustration with the Pharisees, saying, "A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a miraculous sign, but no sign will be given except for the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." They hardened more by what might most reclaim, grieving to see his glory, at the sight took envy, and aspiring to his height, stood re-embattled fierce, by force or fraud weening to prosper, and at length prevail against God and Messiah, or to fall in universal ruin last, and now to final battle drew, disdaining flight or faint retreat, when the great Son of God to all his host on either hand thus spake. "Stand still in bright array, ye saints, here stand." The Son's command to stand echoes the final line of Milton's Sonnet 19. Also Ephesians 6:11 through. "Here stand, ye angels armed, this day from battle rest. Faithful hath been your warfare, and of God accepted, fearless in his righteous cause. And as ye have received, so have ye done invincibly. But of this cursed crew the punishment to other hand belongs, that is, to the Son. Vengeance is his. God's vengeance is a major theme of the Hebrew scriptures. You can search for examples using the Bible Gateway search engine. Paul repeats this theme in 12:19. God's vengeance. Vengeance is his, or whose he sole appoints. Number to this day's work is not ordained nor multitude. Stand only and behold God's indignation on these godless poured by me. Not you, but me they have despised, yet envied. Against me is all their rage, because the Father, to whom in heaven a supreme kingdom and power and glory appertains, hath honored me according to his will. Therefore to me their doom he hath assigned, that they may have their wish, to try with me in battle which the stronger proves, they all, or I alone, against them. Whereas Satan and even Hesiod's heroic Zeus fight with all their power in the midst of their armies, the Son will battle Satan's whole army single-handed. Milton is fond of celebrating the triumph of the one just man. 2. Or I alone against them, since by strength they measure all, of all other excellent, not emulous, nor care who them excels, nor other strife with them do I vouchsafe. So spake the Son, and into terror changed his countenance too severe to behold, and full of wrath bent on his enemies. At once the four, the cherubim of lions, 753, 754, spread out their starry wings, with dreadful shade contiguous, and the orbs of his fierce chariot rowled, as with the sound of torrent floods, or of a numerous host. He on his impious foes right onward drove, gloomy as night. Under his burning wheels the steadfast empyrean shook throughout of the sphere of highest heaven, all but the throne itself of God. Full soon among them he arrived, in his right hand grasping 10,000 thunders, which he sent before him, such as in their souls and fixed plagues. They astonished, all resistance lost, all courage, down their idle weapons dropped. O'er shields and helmed heads he rode, o'er thrones and mighty seraphim prostrate, that wished the mountains now might be again thrown on them, as a shelter from his ire. Nor less on either side tempestuous fell his arrows from the fourfold visaged four, distinct with eyes. The sun's chariot is festooned with eyes. Raphael invites us to imagine the demise of the rebel angels as affected largely by the gaze of the sun and his cherubic servants, as if their eyes alone were the arrows of their ruin, and the sun's ire and thunderous threats. Satan and his army fall without ever being really struck by anything but looks and sounds. Dogs bark. And from the living wheels, distinct alike with multitude of eyes, one spirit in them ruled, and every eye glared lightning and shot forth pernicious fire. Among the accursed that withered all their strength, and of their wonted vigor left them drained. Exhausted, spiritless, afflicted, fallen, similar to the description of Adam after the fall. Yet half his strength he put not forth, but checked his thunder in mid-volley, for he meant not to destroy, but root them out of heaven. The overthrown he raised, and as a herd of goats. This allusion also prefigures the last judgment, when Christ will separate the sheep from the goats and drive the goats from him into the fire. Of goats, or timorous flock together thronged, drove them before him thunderstruck, pursued with terrors and with furies to the bounds and crystal wall of heaven, which opening wide rowled inward, and spacious gap and disclosed into the wasteful deep. The monstrous sight struck them with horror backward, but far worse urged them behind. Headlong themselves they threw down from the verge of heaven. Ooh. Eternal wrath burnt after them to the bottomless pit. Hell heard the insufferable noise. Hell saw heaven ruining from heaven, and would have fled affrighted, but strict fate had cast too deep her dark foundations, and too fast had bound. 9 days they fell. Milton compares the falling angels to the Titans who challenged the gods of Olympia. In Hesiod's Theogony, the Titans fell for 9 days before they reached the underworld. Confounded chaos roared, and felt tenfold confusion in their fall. Through his wild anarchy, so huge a rout encumbered him with ruin. Hell at last yawning received them whole, and on them closed hell their fit habitation fraught with fire unquenchable. The house of woe and pain, disburdened heaven did rejoice, and soon repaired her mural breach, the opening in the wall, returning whence it rowled. Sole victor from the expulsion of his foes, Messiah his triumphal chariot turned. To meet him all his saints, who silent stood eyewitness of his almighty acts, with jubilee advanced, and as they went, shaded with branching palm. Each order bright sung triumph, and him sung victorious King, Son, Heir, and Lord, to him dominion given, worthiest to reign. He celebrated rode triumphant, the palm branches and songs of triumph, suggest the image of Jesus' entry in Jerusalem shortly before his crucifixion. He celebrated rode triumphant through mid-heaven, into the courts and temple of his mighty Father throned, on high, who into glory him received, where now he sits at the right hand of bliss, thus measuring things in heaven by things on earth, at thy request, and that thou mayest beware, by what is past, To thee I have revealed what might have else to human race been hid, the discord which befell, and war in heaven among the angelic powers, and the deep fall of those too high aspiring who rebelled with Satan. He who envies now thy state, who now is plotting how he may seduce thee also from obedience, that with him bereaved of happiness thou mayst partake his punishment, eternal misery, which would be all his solace and revenge, as a despite dawn against the Most High, thee once to gain companion of his woe, but listen not to his temptations. Warn thy weaker. Eve, who, though present during Raphael's story, is spoken of as though absent. Perhaps she is clearing the food and dishes. The phrase thy weaker comes from 1 Peter 3:7, where a wife is referred to as the weaker vessel. Let it profit thee to have heard by terrible example the reward of disobedience. Firm they might have stood, yet fell, remember, in fear to transgress. End of Book 6. So you can see, it's plain to see, no matter the power, the fallen angels and Satan believed they had to contend against the powers of heaven, stood no match for the Son when he came down on his emblazoned chariot. Need not even strike a blow, other than utter words of thunder. Words are important in war. And notice the heavenly angels that had not fallen did not return the insults that the fallen angels laid to them on the battlefield. But yet, Jesus, the Son of Man, struck fear into their hearts. So much so, he struck fear into their hearts with his words. And they turned and wished the mountain would encumber them again. That is what is coming to these invaders of Ukraine. I'm sorry to, but that is what is their end. So thanks for joining me for this reading of Book 6 of Paradise Lost. We now know how they were defeated in battle by the Son of Man on the third day. And seeing the power of heaven cannot be contended against the power of the fallen angels that were a third of heaven. Thanks for joining. This has been a lot of fun to read, and I hope you also enjoyed it. If you like more of these, please subscribe. I'm Silly Sod. I love doing these videos, and again, thanks for joining. All right, have a good rest of your day. Thank you.